Ukrainian counterattacks are making significant gains, but there are also fierce defensive efforts by the Russians. Although the Ukrainian army managed to break through the Russian defense lines a bit more, it seems that the progress will not be as fast as imagined. Despite facing superior Russian aviation and artillery, Ukrainian defense forces continue to carry out offensive and defensive operations with partial success. The Ukrainian army is advancing, albeit slowly, in the Donbass and Zaporizhia Oblast. Ukrainian forces are also attacking the Bakhmut area and liberating the lands on the flanks of the devastated city. Panic is growing among Russian soldiers on the flanks of Bakhmut due to the advance of the Ukrainian armed forces. The situation for the Russian army in the Bakhmut direction has seriously deteriorated. The Ukrainian defense forces have cut off the flanks from the north and south and closed in around Bakhmut. Russian troops are caught in a trap in Bakhmut as they tried to stop the advance of the Ukrainian armed forces. The Russians have deployed large numbers of personnel to counterattack and recapture the liberated areas. Additionally, Ukrainian defenders discovered a Russian field ammunition depot near Bakhmut, which was destroyed by artillery attacks. The State Border Service of Ukraine reported that border guards are destroying the logistics of the invaders near Bakhmut through fire and explosions. They stated that Ukrainian air reconnaissance had discovered the depot, and mortar shells were used to launch a fire attack on the field depot where the invaders were stockpiling ammunition. One of the artillery shells hit the hidden ammunition depot, causing an explosion. As a result, the ammunition depot, its fortifications, and 2 invaders were destroyed. The State Border Guard Service said that Russian soldiers are demoralized, and chaos reigns among Russian troops near Bakhmut. The mood swing among the Russians is at its maximum. For the invaders, the forests of Vika have become a greater hell than Bakhmut. Soldiers from the armed forces of Ukraine are taking each other prisoner by shooting at each other every day due to the high density and weak interaction of different units. He assured that the attack on this area was very difficult for the armed forces of Ukraine. There are 2 options: either bypass the forests or destroy them together with the invading army of the Russian Federation. So, what is happening in Bakhmut and the rest of the Eastern Front in eastern Ukraine? The Russian army is trying to push the Ukrainian forces out of their positions by carrying out attacks on multiple fronts, including the Lyman region. The intensity of the fighting near Bakhmut has somewhat diminished as Ukraine carried out successful offensive operations in certain areas. Ukrainian armed forces have captured dominant heights and forest belts and are making every effort to stop the advance by reinforcing the enemy's troops. Russia is deploying additional reserves to Bakhmut, according to the Ukrainian General Staff. In the last day, the Ukrainian Air Force carried out 9 attacks on the concentration of Russian military personnel, destroying a Russian anti-aircraft missile system. Additionally, Ukrainian rocket forces and artillery struck 2 Russian command posts, 2 ammunition depots, and an artillery unit in firing position. The Ukrainian armed forces, especially in recent days, have started to advance east towards Volodar from the direction of Tavria. The aim of the Ukrainians here is to create an offensive corridor from Zaporizhia to the front lines and take control of the areas from Donetsk to Luhansk. So, how did the Ukrainian forces manage to create this offensive corridor? Recently, the Ukrainian army took a critical step in this regard. Ukrainian defense forces in the direction of Tavria advanced 1 kilometer in the Volodar area. Valery Churkin, spokesperson for the Joint Press Center of the Tavria Direction Defense Forces, announced this significant progress. Currently, the military efforts of the Ukrainians continue in this city. The Russians had lost important troops in this city after the almost complete destruction of the Russian Army's 155th Marine Corps in Volodar. The Russian forces in this city were facing serious military challenges. Critical developments were already expected in Volodar, with the Ukrainians gaining a great advantage in the Zaporizhia and Donetsk offensive corridor. It is, therefore, not surprising that the Ukrainians sent reinforcements to Volodar from the direction of Tavria. Also, if you remember, the missile units and artillery units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces in the direction of Tavria recently completed a total of 1,577 firing missions. After these attacks, the Russian forces also predicted that the Ukrainians would head towards Volodar after the Zaporizhia front lines. After these last attacks by the Ukrainians in the direction of Tavria, 34 Russian soldiers were destroyed, and 85 soldiers were injured. In addition to the Russian ammunition depots in this direction, 9 military equipment of the Russian army was also destroyed. By taking advantage of these military losses of the Russian army, the Ukrainians eased their route towards Bulldog. There were 36 clashes and 578 attacks in the last day. Ukrainian rocket and artillery units in the direction of Tavria completed their mission with 1,481 shots in the Tavria direction. The daily losses of the Russian troops, in terms of soldiers killed and wounded in action, are more than 400 Ukrainian defenders destroyed, 12 tanks, 6 infantry fighting vehicles, and the same number of armored combat vehicles. 3 MTBS, 1 armored personnel carrier, 1 65mm howitzer, 2 Zala drones, and several military trucks were also destroyed. 3 Russian ammunition depots in the Tavria direction were also destroyed. Ukrainian troops advanced up to 2 kilometers in some places on the southern front. Russia is redeploying its troops from other directions and increasing its firepower on the Berdyansk and Mariupol fronts. Ukraine is faced with large minefields in these areas. However, the Ukrainian troops managed to maintain their defensive positions without any casualties. It is stated in the Orkan inscriptions that there cannot be an immoral state or community. Customs, on the other hand, is a name given to a set of unwritten rules. Customs are not limited to determining the norms of social life. There is also a custom in the military. Obedience to orders plays an important role in military customs. Today, however, these rules have softened a little. However, disobedience did not go unpunished. The Russian army is about to go down in the history of world wars on disobedience. In this video, we will talk about the high-ranking admiral who was dismissed for disobeying Putin's orders. Let's dive into the details of this scandalous news in the Russian army rank chain. The commander of Russia's Pacific Fleet was dismissed a week after the surprise inspection. The change was announced a week after the Russian Pacific Fleet was ordered to conduct surprise combat exercises to repel a theoretical enemy landing. A senior Russian Navy commander has refused to send any more of his men to war in Ukraine. Thereupon, it was claimed that the admiral was fired by Vladimir Putin. Admiral Sergei Avakhin, 66, was the commander of Russia's Pacific Fleet before his sudden dismissal from his post last week. Russia's Pacific Fleet, stationed in the port of Vladivostok, did not comment on the reshuffle. Avakhin was appointed commander of Russia's Pacific Fleet in May 2012. He was awarded the rank of military admiral on December 13, 2014. Avakhin was awarded medals for his service in the Russian army. When Avakhin received marching orders from the Kremlin, he was participating in war games involving nuclear bombers. But a Russian Defense Ministry source insisted that the admiral had decided to retire after a long and distinguished career. The source tried to downplay the significance of the admiral's dismissal. Putin's envoy, Yuri Tretynev, stated that 65-year-old Admiral Sergei Avakhin was appointed head of a group responsible for military sports education and patriotic education. These training centers are planned to be opened in 11 regions of Russia and Donetsk, which was illegally annexed from Ukraine. The centers are scheduled to open in May, and at least 9,000 people are expected to arrive throughout the year. The centers will educate people aged 14 to 35, including school children and students. In addition, the allegations about why the Russian admiral was fired are quite diverse. One of the allegations is related to the Da disaster. A group of elite Marines from the Pacific Fleet nearly perished in an attempt to take Viola Dar. That's why the admiral was disappointed about the Kremlin's war in Ukraine. For this eastern Ukrainian town, the Russians suffered high casualty rates. The Russian army lost more than 100 military equipment, including 36 tanks, in just 3 days. The 55th Guards, Marine Corps Brigade, and the 40th Marine Corps Brigade of the Pacific Fleet were particularly affected by the conflict and lost almost all of their soldiers. Sergei Avakhin refused to send any more of his trained officers into the war, opposing the orders of the Russian leader. The admiral was dismissed. Another claim about the admiral's dismissal concerns his success in the exercises. Moscow held exercises as a show of strength amid tensions with the West due to conflicts in Ukraine. The Russian army concentrated the bulk of its forces on the front lines in Ukraine. However, the Russian army continued to conduct regular exercises across Russia to train its forces and demonstrate their readiness. Last week, the entire Russian Pacific Fleet was placed on high alert for impromptu exercises that would involve missile launches. More than 25,000 soldiers, 89 aircraft, and 12 submarines participated in the exercise on April 14th. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu stated that the purpose of war games is to test the ability of the Russian armed forces to respond to aggression. Sergei Shoigu stated that in addition to the naval aviation of the Pacific Fleet, nuclear-capable strategic bombers and other warplanes will also participate in the exercises. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the Southern Sea of Okhotsk, the Peter the Great Bay, and the Sea of Japan, and the Avacha Bay on the southeast coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula will be closed to sea and air traffic for a while. Russian Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin informed foreign military attaches about the exercises. Fomin stressed that these were intended to test the readiness of the Pacific Fleet to repel aggression. The Russian ministry described the briefing as a demonstration of Russia's voluntary transparency. In addition, the Russian Ministry of Defense has released videos showing warships and submarines departing to participate in maneuvers. As part of the exercises, Russian naval units deployed on amphibious landing craft and coastal defense missile systems moved to firing positions. On the other hand, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the war games as part of regular training aimed at maintaining the necessary level of readiness of the armed forces. Sergei Shoigu noted that the maneuver's scenario foresees a response to an enemy's attempt to land on Sakhalin Island and the southern Kuril Islands. Japan claims territorial rights over the Kuril Islands, which it calls the Northern Territories. The Soviet Union gave them to World War II. It took the last few days of World War II, and the conflict prevented the countries from signing a peace treaty that officially ended their hostilities. Last year, Russia announced that it was suspending peace talks with Japan to protest Tokyo's sanctions against Moscow for its actions in Ukraine. Russia has increased its military presence on the islands in recent years. It deployed advanced warplanes, anti-ship missiles, and air defense systems. In short, Russia is trying to do its best to hold on in other regions while fighting for life and death on the territory of Ukraine. In another development, new allegations are emerging that Russia has a program to sabotage wind farms and communication cables in the North Sea. The allegations come amid rising tensions between Russia and Western nations following the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the Nord Stream pipeline explosion. The investigation is jointly conducted by public broadcasters in Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Public broadcasters claim that Russia has a fleet of ships disguised as fishing boats in the North Sea and research vessels carrying underwater surveillance equipment to map key areas for possible sabotage. These allegations focus on a Russian ship called the Admiral Vladimirsky, believed to be a spy ship disguised as the Expeditionary Oceanographic ship. Also, on this issue raises concerns about hostile activity against maritime infrastructure and communications cables, including a major incident in the Shetland Islands last year when a cable was cut and severely hampered communications with the mainland. The documentary uses an unknown former UK Royal Navy expert to track the ship's movements around 7 wind farms off the UK and Dutch coasts on a single mission. Western countries are carrying out similar activities against Russia for the exploration of sensitive areas, with the intention of having few options in case the war in Ukraine escalates. As a result, the turmoil in the Russian army never ends. The wrong decisions taken in the war in Ukraine are blamed on top commanders. Russian commanders are quickly dismissed from their posts due to failure or disobedience. Considering that the war continues, it's only a matter of time before these situations occur again in the Russian army. How do you think the dismissal of top commanders could affect the Ukrainian war? The Ukrainian army is also pursuing a special battle strategy around Kherson. For this, the Ukrainian army breaks through the trenches from a single point. After breaking through the Russian trenches, Ukrainian troops launch operation in 2 different directions. The Russian army cannot find a solution to this plan of attack. Russian troops are helpless in this phase of Ukrainian raids. On the other hand, the Ukrainian government is doing its best to ensure the successful conclusion of the offensive. One of the efforts in this regard is lowering of the dam water level. The Ukrainian government is making great efforts to solve this problem and save civilians. According to the latest statements, floodwaters have dropped on many fronts. Ukrainian officials said in a statement. The water level has dropped more than a meter in one day and more than 7 meters since the explosions. After the rapid raise of the dam waters, the Russian army thought it would have a success in this operation. However, the Ukrainian army soon made significant achievements in this war zone. Comprehensive measures were taken against the dam waters, and Russia's plan was thwarted. The Russian army failed to buy time. The most important achievements of Ukrainian army was to use of Leopard 2 tanks. In recent battles, the Ukrainian army started using these tanks around Kherson. The cannons of the Leopard 2 tanks are destroying the Russian trenches one by one. One of the fronts where the Ukrainian army is conducting operation is around the city of Boulder. The Russian army is being pushed back during operations on this front in the south of Donetsk region. Russian troops are withdrawing their troops from the town of Myklinsky. Towards this town, the number of the trenches in the countryside between Boulder and Myklinsky has started to increase. The two armies will face each other on the front. The fighting in this area will change the maps after this front. The Ukrainian army plans to capture the town of Pavlivka. The town of Peshtigo, located west of Pavlivka, is under the control of the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army is establishing superiority in different regions by penetrating the Russian trenches. Then these fronts are combined. The Ukrainian army is following the same plan. On this front, troops from the town of Peshtigo are now moving towards Pavlivka. The Ukrainian army can gain a strong position in this area. Fighting in the marine direction has also intensified. The Russian army tried to launch an offensive on this front, but the Ukrainian army successfully defended. The Ukrainian army repelled 13 Russian attacks in the area of the city of Marinka. The Russian army lost lots of ammunition on this front. The Ukrainian army is putting up a very successful defense, but the Russian army is extremely unsuccessful in this regard. In the last operation organized by the Ukrainian army, the Russian army could not defend the Ukrainian army. Organized airstrike in the area of region. Artillery strikes were also used effectively in these operations. Russian troops could not do nothing against the Ukrainian army's artillery systems. The Russian army suffered a lot of losses in this front. On the other hand, Kharkiv Oblast is one of the regions where the operations are conducting fearlessly. In this region, which is the northernmost front of the war, the Ukrainian army has made very strong progress. The fighting around Kupiansk is especially fierce. Maps are constantly being updated in this region. Therefore, military deliveries in this region are very difficult. Clashes are also ongoing on the P7 highway, which passes through the center of Kharkiv, and it is the most active highway in Kupiansk. The Russian army is trying to use this highway. However, the Ukrainian army maintains its dominance on this highway from the town of Novoselki. This is disturbing the delivery of ammunition to the Russian army. The Ukrainian army also managed to destroy a Russian Ka-52 helicopter on this front. The Orlan 10 operational tactical UAV was also destroyed over the past day. Missile forces and artillery units have hit 3 checkpoints, 2 anti-aircraft missile systems, a concentration of Russian troops, and 3 artillery units in firing positions. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar also shared data on the Ukrainian army's advance. According to the data shared by Hanna Maliar, the Ukrainian army advanced another 6.5 kilometers as a result of the latest operations. The names of the 7 liberated settlements are as follows: Lukavla-Vogny, Nevada; Rivkina-Skichny, Istrajivi, Makarovka, Blaga, Doni, and Bakhmut. The Ukrainian army continues its advance today. It is known that the Ukrainian army advanced about 700 meters further. It is very difficult to advance on this front where the trenches are very close to each other. However, despite this, the Ukrainian army continues to advance every day. Experts following the war zone say that the Ukrainian army's advance is extraordinary. In recent days, the Ukrainian army has been establishing a great superiority in the operations. The Russian army is expected to retreat on many fronts in a short time. It is reported that the number of Russian soldiers, especially in and around Kafka, is rapidly decreasing. Russian soldiers are experiencing a great loss of power in this region. Flash developments are happening every day in war zone. Everyone knows that the Russian army is in a very difficult situation. We continue to report the latest developments and map updates in the war zone for you. Stay tuned for the latest developments in the war zone. Follow us for more updates.